Fortitude worked. That was well done. Had a nice little cliffhanger and everything. So we can do a question and answer now. Maybe you have any questions? Yes.
Did the two people who are ahead of you in the writing contest or the Star Trek contest, do they have book deals?
Probably not. I actually have no idea, but I like to think not.
I confess I haven't read the story. I just randomly heard a couple of adult romance bloggers chit-chatting about it on Twitter, and then I went to a bookstore and saw the cover just last night, and it caught my eye, and then I got an email that you were coming, so I was like, well. But I just read just a couple of brief reviews, and it looks like it says New Beijing.
Yes.
What made you choose that for your...
Well, there's two reasons. The very scholarly, important reason is because a lot of fairy tale scholars can trace our Cinderella story back to 9th century China. And instead of a fairy godmother, she actually had a talking fish, and it was the first recorded, recognizable Cinderella story. And so it felt like it had a really great cyclical quality for the 9th century China to the future China. The not scholarly reason is that I'm a huge Sailor Moon fan, and my original inspiration for Cinder's character was actually a Japanese actress who played Sailor Jupiter in the live-action Sailor Moon show. And even though Cinder's changed a lot since that initial inspiration, it just seemed like it belonged in futuristic Asia. So.
Your social hierarchy is really interesting with the androids, cyborgs, and people. Was that always a focus, or are you going to deal with that in later books?
It will. It will continue to come up. It didn't start out a focus, and in the early draft there really wasn't the oppression of cyborgs that you see in the final book, which didn't work at all. I mean, as I started revising, I was like, why does everybody hate her? Even I don't get it. And so then it kind of slowly developed into, that people just don't think they're trustworthy, they don't really understand them, and of course ignorance often leads to prejudice, and so it did slowly develop over time, over multiple drafts.
Going back to the New Beijing question, sort of a multi-part question, did you do a lot of research, or do you feel that, I've read the first 5 chapters that were available on Kindle. I noticed not all the names are Asian, but some seem to perhaps have Asian, references. How did you create this Asian culture? Is it one specific, is it China? Is it Japan? Is it, can you just talk more about that?
Yeah, it's actually, the country is called the Eastern Commonwealth. So in my futuristic world, the story takes place 126 years after the Fourth World War. And so the history is that after the World War, they decided we can't do this anymore, huge waste of resources and everything, and that, part of the problems that were being created on Earth is that there's just too many countries fighting over the land and fighting over the resources. And so they conglomerated down into 6 countries. And the Eastern Commonwealth takes up all of our modern-day Asia, from Japan to India, and then a large part of Russia also. And so when I was creating the culture, I tried to, take bits and pieces from a lot of different Asian cultures. And so there are Indian names and there are Japanese names, and some of the traditions that you see, like during the coronation ceremony, are a mixture of many different cultures. And I did a fair amount of research, as much as I could, without flying to China, which is what I really wanted to do. And I, hope I didn't miss anything huge. It's probably one of my biggest worries, is that I made a huge mistake in the Chinese culture and I don't know about it. But there's only so much a writer can do. Yes.
Can we look forward to more fairy tale characters popping up?
Yes. Excellent question. So Cinder is the first in a 4-book series. Each book in the series will be based on a different fairy tale. So book number 2 is Scarlet. It's based on Little Red Riding Hood. Book number 3, Cress, is based on Rapunzel, and book number 4, Winter, is based on Snow White. And so Cinder continues to be the main character. She is the hero of the story, and you'll see her travels continue. But in each book you meet a new heroine who has her own problems and her own romance and her own story to tell. And as their stories go on, their paths kind of intertwine and they join forces against their common enemy, being the evil queen.
So do they travel to like different regions, like outside of the Eastern?
Yeah, book 2 is largely set in France. Book 3, a large part of it will take place in the Sahara Desert. And book 4 is almost all on Luna, so you'll get to see the lunar culture and world building.
Is it all? I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, it sounds like you've got it pretty well outlined and mapped out. Is everything written at this point?
The second book is with my editor, and I have first drafts completed of books 3 and 4. So first drafts are rough. Like I said with Cinder, I scrapped the entire thing and started over, and that very well could happen for these books too. But yes, I have a pretty good idea in my head of where it's all going.
Can you speak to process a little bit? You said with the competition that you certainly outlined it, and whether that was largely a function of the word goal and how sort of how much are you working, how tightly are you working alongside your outline versus sort of the finished books?
Well, I am definitely an outliner. I have been for many, many years. But when I outline, I try to make as complete and detailed an outline as possible. But I know that it's all going to change when I start writing it, and so I let myself have the room to change and let the characters do what they want, and things always end up different as I expect, and I often have to stop halfway through a book and rework the rest of the outline because everything's different now. And then in between drafts too, I usually create a scene list, so what happens in every scene in the book. And then that gets all rearranged, and that I have notes to myself about, okay, this is what I'm going to do next, and this is, changing to this now, and then go back and rewrite and revise some more. So I definitely like to plan ahead before I jump in, but while still leaving myself the space to change it in the writing.
And the second part is, how many times have you had to edit out Tuxedo Mask?
Don't you know, Prince Kai, actually. There's definitely, any Sailor Moon fans will definitely see the inspiration in the book, in the Lunar Chronicles. Lots of throwbacks.
Is Cinder I mean, it's a third person, as I recall from what I read 2 weeks ago. You'd think I would remember. But is she kind of the lens through which we see the next 3 stories as well, or?
It will switch point of views.
Okay.
So I'd say for Scarlet, it's probably about 40% Cinder and 60% Scarlet.
Okay.
Plague and disease play a big part in Cinder. Will that continue?
Yes.
Through the, okay.
Yeah. And a lot of the things in the book, Letimosis is a perfect example, or the lunar soldiers that you only get a very brief glimpse of in the book, are things that directly tie into the future fairy tales. And I hope that as the series progresses, it'll be fun for readers to look back and be like, oh, I see the suggestion of this back in book 1, and like feel like I actually know what I'm doing.
Well, speaking of that, did you have like those hints in the not the first draft because you said you scrapped it, but did you have them all along, or after you started writing them?
They've been dropped in gradually we'll say the second draft, since that was really the one that really started taking shape of the story. It's all about the story, what's happening in this book, and what's important to get from beginning to middle to end. But as I go through revisions and also as I'm thinking and working on the outlines for the next book, I think, oh, this would be a really great scene to hint at this here, and maybe throw in a little information about this. So it's a gradual building process.
You mentioned Puss in Boots earlier. Will that be available to read on your blog, or is it available anywhere?
It was written as a fan fiction, so if you can read it online now at fanfiction.net.
Okay.
My pen name is Alicia Blade. So
is there Sailor Moon fan fiction too?
Yeah, it's all Sailor Moon fan fiction. I probably wrote like 45 Sailor Moon fanfics. That's definitely how I got my start in writing. So I'm proud of it.
What was your day job, out of curiosity?
I was an editor for 5 years, and then I became a freelance typesetter and proofreader.
So always kind of a bookie.
Always books. I always knew I wanted to have a job in books. And of course, growing up, you tell people, I want to be a writer, and they're like, that's nice. And everybody knows that it's not a job that a lot of people can make their living. And so I wanted to be in books, and so I went to school. I have a minor in printing and publishing arts, and then I have a master's degree in publishing, and thought, okay, I'll be an editor, or I'll be an agent, or I'll be a publicist, or who knows. But kind of ironically, while I was studying publishing and how to be on the publishing side of things, we would study, the acquisitions process and the sales process, and we'd talk about sending authors on tour and all these fun things. And I was like, I want to be the author in this equation. I don't want to be the editor or the agent. And so learning to be in the publishing world kind of gave me that extra push. It's like, you really need to try to be a writer. And I did. Here I am.
You have an amazing blog tour schedule. Did your publisher set that up for you, or did you do it through your contacts?
A kind of a mix of both. I have a lot of blogger friends, so I sent a list to my publicist and was like, these are some blogs that I really love and some blogger friends, and it would be really great if they were included. And she included all of them. And then she also had a lot of her own contacts as well. So yeah, so I've actually met a lot of new bloggers through it. It's been a really awesome experience. The blog tour has been fun.
So, what were the books that you read as a kid, that you read over and over, that you just loved?
Well, for starters, I'm not really a read-over type.
Okay.
But I did read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory many a time, and Anne of Green Gables.
Yes.
Yeah. What else did I read many times?
Makeup.
Not until I was a teenager did I really read manga.
So what about fairy tales as like an inspiration? Like what inspires you about fairy tales?
I love fairy tales. I've always loved fairy tales, and I don't really know where that's. You know what? That's a lie, actually. I think I can pinpoint where it started. So my first Disney love was, of course, The Little Mermaid, which came out when I was like 4 or 5 or something, and saw it in theaters and everything. And then maybe my grandma, somebody gave me a book of fairy tales, and the first one in the book was The Little Mermaid, Hans Christian Andersen, and I'm like, oh yay, I'm so excited to read it, and then I read it. And if you know, it does not have any Disney ending. I was so shocked and stunned by this, and I think that kind of started this whole fascination with, like, what is Disney not telling us? And I've kind of been intrigued ever since with how they have this, like, really dark, gory history that not a lot of people know about. And I also took a fairy tale fantasy literature course in college, and we went really in depth into like the symbolism in fairy tales and how they speak to your social subconscious, and it was just really fascinating, and I just have been in love with fairy tales ever since. I don't think anybody who knows me was surprised that my first book was a Cinderella retelling. They're all like, yeah, clearly.
Are there any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Please give Marissa a round of